Hello everyone, it's Paul and welcome to the final installment of my Blackrock Foundry raid guide. In today's video I'll be covering the encounter with Blackhand on heroic difficulty. Now the encounter with Blackhand is a 3-phase encounter. It lasts about 7 minutes total, and because that's pretty fast I'll go over each phase twice. First time through a phase I'll go over all of the abilities and the mechanics that happen, and the second time I'll go over some tips that we found out while we were learning the fight. Right off the pull, you're going to want to keep Blackhand to the outside of the ring here. He's going to throw out some slag bombs here shortly. Those will appear in a small radius around Blackhand and arm themselves in about 3 to 5 seconds. Running over those bombs will actually place a debuff on the player that will cause them to take extra damage. You always want to avoid this. The next ability that comes up in sequence here is going to be a Shattering Smash on the tank. This is going to knock the tank back and cause them to drop all aggro. In phase 1, this ability is simply handled by the tank that is currently tanking Blackhand. Now while all of this is going on, the ranged will actually be dealing with 2 mechanics. The first is a demolition phase, the second is marks for death, which you just saw go out there. The biggest thing about mark for death is that anything that interrupts line of sight will actually stop the ability from hitting the person. So as it's going out, you need to make sure that it gets intercepted. As you see, our 2 ranged guys right there, they move behind these massive debris piles that are caused by the demolition attack. Right there, our DK tank gets smashed back and we encounter the second demolition phase. Now, these big orange circles you see here, those are the primary focus during this demolition phase. Those will do less damage to you the further away from it you are, but you want to be far away from it. You do not just want to be at the edge of the circle, otherwise it'll kill you. And boom, if your DPS is good enough, you're going to encounter your first transition right here at 70%. So let's go back to the start. What are the biggest principles here for phase 1 that you want to be aware of? First of all, the melee and the outside of the room, it's going to be melting slowly. Any bombs that actually hit that melting outside are going to detonate, so you want to keep the boss far towards the outside, but not so far that you're hitting detonated bombs. For the melee, the biggest thing to worry about, honestly, is just those bombs and making sure that you're not near the big orange circles from demolition. Now, this is the same concern for the ranged. The 2 things ranged have to worry about are marked for death and demolition. Okay? Massive demolition, you just want to be far away from it, and marked for death, you have to run behind those piles that are created by the ceiling falling down. Now, the biggest trick to this is that you always have to be aware of where the next available pile is. So we actually have our raid leader calling out which pile to use. Sometimes they don't quite get to it, sometimes they do, but it really helps people focus up and know where they're going with marked for death. Now for the tanks and the melee, the second Shattering Smash is a bit complicated because it comes right on top of new slag bombs and right before a demolition. So you want to move the boss away from the bombs, but you want to move him so that you're not getting wrecked by the demolition. And we actually have our tank get gripped, I believe, by a priest so that he doesn't spend a lot of time in the molten slag on the outside edges of the room. If you're actually hitting a third Shattering Smash, we recommend that that's the one you grip because your tank will most likely die if he stays outside too long. Now, as you're falling down here, if you're the tank that is doing the transition tanking, you want to pick up Blackhand as soon as possible and move him towards the eastern side of the room. Moving him to the east side is important for the balcony mechanic that's going to be coming up with Shattering Smash. I'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later when I'm the one that's getting smashed up. The thing that will make or break this fight for you is going to be how you handle the Siegemaker mechanic. The Siegemaker is this tank that you see just appearing on screen. This will be kited preferably by a hunter, and it should get kited over bombs, and this is what provides your line of sight blocker for marked of death for your ranged and for your healers. Now you'll also notice that the Siegemaker has an energy bar. Whenever this reaches 100, it will start casting fire. It is important that it is dead before it does this because fire in this phase makes it quite a bit harder to survive. Now the complication from this is that marked for death happens 3 times and you only use 2 sets of marked for death to bring down the Siegemaker. So the third marked for death we have soaked by a tank. So both of them stack up behind the tank and the tank is the one that gets hit by this ability. So Shattering Smash in this phase is actually pushes you up onto this balcony where there's ads that are shooting down explosives onto your raid. The way you handle this is you actually have some raid members get smashed up along with the tank. We have 1 healer go as well as 1 boomkin for 15 people. Once you start getting to about 18 to 20 people, you might want to consider throwing up more than just 1 DPS up there. If you don't have a boomkin, we always recommend taking up at least 2 DPS. So right here we just killed the Siegemaker, so you're going to see me as the tank that is intercepting the marked for death. People should be lining up on me here, and I will intercept it and charge back. Very soon after that, a shattering smash happens. Our 3 people for the balcony phase go up top, and we continue moving the boss down here and kiting siege makers. So this phase of the fight is hectic. This phase of the fight is a little bit more complicated, and it really comes down to personal responsibility for all of your raid members. Another complication from the siege maker is that if you have a lot of healers getting marked, it's going to become a little bit more difficult on the tank healing. I usually roll cooldowns when I actually have the 2 marks that I've soaked, since that does put a ticking debuff on you. And we also call out whenever 2 healers are marked. So all of the range should be spread out at least 7 yards apart, so they're not splashing damage from those balcony adds. And you should be killing these off. You should be clearing a balcony every time you get thrown up. So if 1 DPS is not enough for you guys to do it, go and throw a second one on there. It's worth it. But you also want to be pushing Blackhand through this phase as fast as possible. When you're approaching 30%, which is the transition part of this fight, you want to go ahead and make sure people don't tunnel on the boss's health and are still running behind that siege maker, and making sure that it is being kited away from the boss and over bombs. But you're not going to be focusing on killing this, because you're going to be pushing the transition before it reaches 100%. So here we are about to push Blackhand into phase 3. So let's backtrack to the beginning of phase 2 and talk about these mechanics a little bit more. When you land here and you are the tank, it really helps if you have the 4 corners of the room marked. We have our raid lead do this during either the first wipe of the night or whatever have you. But like I said, it is the east side of the room that you want to move the boss to first. Since I am the tank that's handling all of our transition tanking, our DK is actually the one that goes up top first. However you want to do that, that's up to you and your raid comp. The reason we do this is because the one that goes up to the balcony first is going to be the tank that handles 2 sets of marked for death stacks. So he's going to be intercepting 2. The tank that is tanking second will only intercept 1 over the course of the phase. Now, like I said before, Shattering Smash in this phase of the fight will be tossing the tank and we'll call it a balcony group up to that balcony to deal with the ad. Now, the thing about Shattering Smash to remember is that the impact point of the ability is the tank, wherever the tank is standing. And the direction that you get thrown back is with relation to that tank. So your raid members want to actually stand behind the tank, not right on top of him. Because if say you're in front of the tank, you're going to get punted to the entirely opposite side of the room than where you want to go. When you're up on the balcony itself, go ahead and try to interrupt as much of these guys' casts as possible. I also end up fearing every now and then just to disperse them a little bit. Again, we have a Moonkin doing some fucking work up there. That's really the preferable class to do it, because they have that easy button AoE. Now, if you choose to handle Marked for Death the way that we are, where the tank intercepts it, the biggest priority mumble call during this phase is which tank your raid should be stacking behind. This is important because they not only need to know when Marked is coming up and which tank to stack behind, but they also need to be able to find that person and get to a place where they can navigate through bombs quickly so that the Mark doesn't actually hit them and kill them. Now, our melee actually managed to hit a bomb there, so you see all of them with the debuff on them. Biggest thing about this is it doesn't really matter all that much if they don't get killed from the explosion, because they can avoid a large part of the damage throughout the rest of the fight. And the debuff's actually pretty short. So you're kind of doing a circle dance with the Siege Maker, but you always have to make sure that it's not too close to the wall, and your raid always has to be aware of where that thing is going, or if they're lining up behind a tank with the marks. Now, I'll admit, because they made this such a fast fight, it is also a very unforgiving fight. So whenever you mess up on a mechanic like Marked for Death, for example, and you don't have that mark hit the siege tank, it's very likely that it'll get fire out, because the Marks for Death actually remove an armor plating buff that it has, which allows you to put damage into the tank itself. So the way that ability works is you want to have the first 2 Marked for Death hit the siege tank. remove that armor plating debuff, your DPS will then switch to it and bring it to about 35% health, but not any lower, because if you kill it before the second set of marks, then you'll have way too many marks to deal with, and that will likely cause the stacks to get too high. So remove the debuff, bring it to about 35% health, then kill it with marks or extra DPS. Okay, phase 3, the first priority for the phase is for the transition tank to move the boss as close to the edge as possible. Now this has to happen fast, because when slag bomb go out in this phase, they actually put a little circle that you see right here below us, and that little pile that is left over by that circle is going to be detonated by an ability from Blackhand called Slag Eruption. Massive Shattering Smash in this phase needs to be absorbed by the entire raid stacking behind your other tank. You see Slag Eruption go off there and detonate both the Massive Shattering Strike and the Slag Bombs that happened. Now, just like the rest of this fight, marks for death are still going on during this fight, so that's actually what becomes the big enrage, because people are going to have those debuffs. The way that we do this, and there's several other ways to do this, but the way that we do this is that marks go right, bombs go to the edge and flank each side of the tank. And this actually gives us plenty of room for when they're detonated by the Slag Eruption ability that's going off right there. So this phase happens pretty quick. Typically you have one tank absorbing all of the smashes, the other tank is moving the boss right after the smash happens, which is my job in this video. Now the important thing to note here is that the abilities will not always rinse and repeat in the same order, so they don't always line up. Like for example, here we're going to get slag bombs, and those slag bombs are going to get detonated very soon thereafter. And this is actually kind of complicated, because you want to be moving the boss quickly so that you're out for the eruptions, but you're able to line up for the next Shattering Smash. After that point of the fight, which is the fourth smash, it becomes a little bit YOLO, and you can keep continuing to use the edges of the platform, but people just have to be smart, survive, and put enough damage into the boss so that you actually get the kill. It ends up being a pretty sloppy kill for us, but we end up getting it, and many Craigasms were had. So I'm actually going to go ahead and skip to the beginning of phase 3 again and talk about this a little more in detail. So like I said, when I land here, my priority is just to get to the boss to an edge. Some people say, you can move him to a raid marker so that the raid knows where to run. I usually get down there and leap fast enough to where the raid basically knows where to follow me, and the bombs getting to an edge doesn't really become a big issue. Now a couple other things change here. Mark for Death actually penetrates all of the targets that it hits in the line, and it'll obviously put the debuff on them as well. But the important thing about this is that the two marks that are running off to the side so that they're not hitting the raid need to make sure that they're not stacked right behind each other. So you want to be off to the side but not directly behind each other, just like they were right there. Obviously your healers will want to coordinate whichever active healing cooldowns they have for the massive Shattering Smashes, and everybody needs to make sure that they're in a position that when they get hit by that smash, they don't get knocked off of the platform. Now remember, smash happens right where the tank is standing, so you have to be positioned correctly with respect to that tank. So our tank that's handling the smashes is Moon. Everybody's lined up correctly here behind Moon. No one's in front of him, no one's off to the side and getting slammed in a random direction. Now, moving the boss quickly around the edge is also a little bit of a priority. This definitely gives all of your people a good reference point. Everybody knows where they need to go, and people just need to not panic when they get marked and not panic when they get the bombs. Now, like I said, this Slag Eruption right here before the fourth Shattering Smash, this is a hard part of the fight, because you get marks right after it, and you might have some people that are standing near those, and people get confused. We had a couple of tries where in one of the tanks, myself included, taunted early, and things got a little crazy. So when it gets to this part of the fight, make sure you're not getting standing and getting clipped by marks for death. Make sure you're not stacking those marks. Make sure your raid is standing in the right spots for the massive shatters. It does become a little bit of a test of survival. But if you execute everything correctly, you should be good, and should get the kill. So thank you for watching, guys. This has been a fun raid tier. Really enjoyed making these videos for you. And as I said before, there will be a Twitch giveaway that'll be coming up here in a couple weeks. I got a work trip coming up, but we'll get right on that afterwards. I've also added a couple of nights for streaming that are not going to be WoW related. I do some FPS and first-person shooters on Friday, and then I will also likely do a little bit of Star Citizen starting on Saturdays. So if you're interested in either of that, go and tune in. I will also have a weak auras tutorial done here in a week or two, just to help people set up weak auras and how I use it for prot warrior tanking. It's one of the best add-ons that I would recommend. And that's about it, guys. This has been a fun raid tier. I really enjoy doing these videos for you. So this has been Paul. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next raid tier. Oh, and a little owl shout out. Woo!